All right. So this is going to be the video two, the first video, and it's going to be about my mom's mom, which is her name was Lillian. She was born Lillian Tuamala. Um, so she was born in St. Louis County, Minnesota. Her parents, August and Mary, were from Finland, a town called Vimpeli, and they very very poor people. They lived in a small cabin, and uh, what else do I know about her early life? I know more starting when she was 14, but I do know, and this wasn't something she talked about, but and again, I'm not going to go back to research, but I do know that when she was little, August and Mary, her parents, were arrested under the Sedition Act. Because they were accused of worshiping the red flag and encouraging people not to register for the draft for First World War. I don't know the details of that from Grandma because she never spoke about it. I just knew that found that out through research, and it's an area of research I've wanted to do some more of. But so I mean, that's really what I know of her childhood. She had siblings, some of which I was friends with, Aunt Viola and people like that. I knew when I was growing up, and I'd talk to on the phone a lot, and got to know a lot about who they were, and um, but my knowledge of Grandma's story really starts when she was 14, because I know she left home at the age of 14 and moved to Minneapolis, and she became a seamstress apprentice, and then worked and lived in the home of a family, so that in is helping take care of the kids in the house and trade for a place to live. So this is when she was 14 years old. So now again, without looking at the research, I've got to fast forward to what I know from the stories Grandma and Mom would tell, is that you got to fast forward to her living in San Francisco, married to my grandfather by blood, Warren McIntyre. Um, he was a hotel clerk. I know that. I don't know what Grandma did in San Francisco, but I assume it was a seamstress, because that's really the only main career I know of she had, except for, well, I'll get to that later. Um, so so in San Francisco, I don't know the story. Your aunt Laura knows way more than I know, and it's something I've never looked into for various reasons. But something happened. I don't know what the story is. Eventually, they get divorced, and Mom and Grandma end up back in Minnesota, living with August and Mary. Um, and Mom went to school. Mom went to school in Markham for a while. But then again, there's a lapse in what I know. By the time World War II comes along, or a little before World War II, I know that Grandma Lillian is married to Harold Henninger. Um, Harold was a person I knew as Grandpa. He was a great guy. Actually, when I do the story of Grandpa, it's not going to be about Warren McIntyre. It'll be about Grandpa Henninger. So I'll talk about him in that. But anyway, so we're at that point in basically World War II, where Grandma Lillian and Mom and Harold Henninger were all living in Los Angeles. Harold's in the war, serving in the Army Air Corps, and Grandma at that time, apparently, from what I understand, worked in a factory helping with the war effort. And I think it was the North American Aviation Factory, because that's where Grandpa Harold worked. So anyway, fast forward again now a little bit because there's a lot of things Grandma Lillian and Grandpa kind of just moved on. She did seamstress work and craft, a lot of craft type stuff. And I don't know if she had any real jobs other than that after the war. But Grandpa went back to work for North American Aviation and worked on airplanes, and then he worked on the Apollo program, and did that all the way up to retirement. And after he retired, I spent quite a bit of time with Grandma Lillian and Harold when I was young. We'd go to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, and I'd spend a lot of time at their house. And Grandpa Harold would take me fishing, and went out to do different things like that. And I'd do a lot of holidays over at their house in California. And then eventually, and I don't remember what year it was, I guess late 70s, maybe early 80s. They moved up to Waterford, California, which is north of the Los Angeles basin, up kind of in the central part of California by Sacramento, south of Sacramento, kind of by Modesto would be the closest town, I guess. And they moved into a small house there, about a block, or maybe 2 blocks from the school. And we'd go visit them, but not as often as we would when they lived in Southern California near us. So we usually, I'd either go with my sister Laura or go with Mom and Dad, and we'd go up to Waterford and spend some time with them, usually on holidays, and then when we were on our way up to Orcas Island or on our way back down to Orcas Island. Sometimes I'd stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a extended period of time, a while, and then my parents would leave me there, and I'd hang out with or spend time with them, and then Laura would come up to Orcas, and Laura and John would come up to Orcas, and they'd pick me up and take me up, one time I stayed with Grandma, and it was the first time I ever flew alone. She took me up to Sacramento Airport and put me on a plane, and I flew back to Los Angeles. But your Grandma was a really sweet woman. She spoke Finnish. She loved to cook, loved to bake, loved to sew and do embroidery and all kinds of different textile products. She had her house in Waterford was kind of set up, so you had the garage where Harold would work, and then because he liked to do little projects because he did the engineering stuff. Or machinist stuff, but as you went down the hallway, there was the guest room on the left, and then the last room on the left was Grandma's kind of craft studio, I guess you'd call it, where she'd do all these beautiful blankets, and some of which I have here, and embroidery and fine needlework and things like that. But that all dated back to when she was a child, doing that her whole life. She was very sweet. I always played cards with her and Grandpa, and she always had a dog. I remember named Clipper. I liked to eat Mom's cigarettes. I think what else. She'd talk about Minnesota quite a bit, and she'd tell me stories about the family from back when they were in Finland. And she always had an open door policy. We'd go there, and she'd have relatives and family from all over the country and all over the world would always be coming to visit her and stay in her guest room or visit. She just had such an open heart and, always welcoming to people. She was definitely, as far as grandparents, she was definitely my closest to me as a grandparent. Very influential on me, and then, of course, Mom was an only child, so obviously very, very influential on her, and anyway, so, that's sort of what I remember about Grandma, Lillian. So, next video, I'll, talk about, Warren and then Harold, which would be my grandpa, Mom's dad, and stepdad. Anyway, that'll be video 3.